Hello everyone. I hope you are still staying safe and well. It's a nice sunny day here in the Bay Area, much nicer than yesterday, but we're still stuck inside. So for today's video, I would like to talk about augmented six chords. So the augmented six chords are another series of predominant functioning chords, meaning that they will go to your 5 chord or your 1-6-4 chord. They are meant to draw your ear to 5, much like secondary dominants, if you already learned about those. However, they're not exactly chords in the traditional sense. So I would urge you not to think of them as chords having a root, 3rd, 5th, 7th, and so on. And we'll go into why that is in just a bit. And in my opinion, what makes these chords A, so cool, and B, sound so cool too. So if you want to emphasize a pitch in a melody, in a even in a harmony, you can do that in a couple ways, but one of the ways that you can achieve this is by approaching it chromatically. And so you emphasize the resolution to that pitch, which emphasizes in your ear, oh, yes, that's the pitch that I'm supposed to hear. So if you are trying to emphasize your dominant, let's say we are in the key of B flat major today. So friendly major scale. In the key of B flat, your 5 is going to be F, tonic, dominant. So if you want to emphasize that F, you can approach it chromatically. So if you approach it chromatically from below, you get E natural, which is not diatonic to the key of B flat. And if you want to approach it from above chromatically, you would approach it with G flat, which is also not diatonic in the key of B flat. However, it just so happens that G flat up to that E natural is an augmented 6, right? So G flat to E flat is a major 6. And when you make that E flat and E natural, it becomes an augmented 6. And it's very important that we note it's an augmented 6, not a minor 7, because it does not resolve the way a minor 7 would resolve. And I'll explain that here in just a second. But that augmented 6 interval between those two pitches that approach 5 chromatically is the characteristic of this chord, and why its resolution and emphasis to 5 is so powerful. And it's a really great tool for composers to use as a pivot chord in modulations, but that's way down the line in another video. So anyway, there are 3 flavors of augmented 6 chord. We'll stay in the key of B flat. So you have your Italian, your French, and your German +6 chords. We'll start with the Italian just for simplicity. So again, we're staying in B flat major. So my Italian 6 chord is going to have my flat 6, that G flat, the sharp 4, that E natural, and tonic, B flat. And if you're writing a 4-part texture, you will always, well, almost always, double tonic. So that B flat, you'll double. The French chord is going to be exactly the same as the Italian +6 chord, but now you're going to add scale degree 2. So in the key of B flat, scale degree 2 is C natural. So now you're going to have G flat, flat 6, B flat, tonic, E natural, sharp 4, and C, scale degree 2. So that's your French. Your German +6 chord is going to be the same as your Italian +6 chord, but you're going to add scale degree flat 3. So in the key of B flat, your third scale degree is D natural. For the German chord, you're going to have G flat, flat 6, tonic, sharp 4, and then you're going to add D flat. Okay, and some of you can probably tell just by me sitting here and playing it out of context, it sounds like a dominant 7th chord, because it is, but it does not function as a 7th chord. And so that's why we notate G flat, B flat, D flat, E natural for the resolutions, and I'll explain those in just a second. Something worth noting, when you're in a minor key, we'll go to B flat minor just for consistency's sake. So B flat minor is going to be okay, so you're going to spell these chords exactly the same way in a minor key, but it's worth noting that your flat 6, in this case your G flat in B flat minor, is diatonic. So if you're analyzing a piece of music and you're in a minor key, the augmented 6 chords are going to be harder to locate because you won't have an accidental for that flat 6. It'll just be out in the wild doing its thing. You'll have to look for the sharp 4, which in this case would be E natural. And if you were reading a piece in B flat minor and told, hey, find the augmented 6 chord. So that's something worth to note. So how do we use these chords? Well, like I said earlier, they're predominant chords. They are designed to draw your ear to 5, which is what makes them fabulous pivot chords if you want to modulate. But you will usually have, in terms of part writing, your flat 6 in the bass, so in B flat major or minor, that's G flat. And then you'll want to put the sharp 4 in one of the upper voices, so the alto or soprano. Sometimes you'll find these in the tenor voice. It's not as common, but the reason that is, when this interval resolves, the flat 6 resolves a half step down, the sharp 4 resolves a half step up. So you resolve those 2 pitches outwardly to your 5. So G flat to F, E natural to F. Okay, and so how do they sound? I know I kind of played them for you earlier, but if you want to think about it, still playing in the key of B flat, your Italian +6, which is going to be G flat, B flat, E natural, B flat, it's going to sound like 1, 3, and 7 of a dominant 7th chord. So if we backtrack for just a sec, remember that the German chord is the enharmonic dominant 7th chord. So if I spell that out in root position, which happens to also be the correct notation in part writing if you're writing this anyway, the tonic and the flat 3 can be in either the alto or tenor voices. Usually you just want to put those where you can to avoid parallel fifths and octaves and that kind of thing. But if I spelled this thing out root position in B flat, it would be G flat, B flat, D flat, E. Now if I want to enharmonically spell the dominant 7th chord, it's going to be F sharp, A sharp, C sharp, E. And so the Italian +6 is the same as the German, it just doesn't have flat 3, which is D flat or C sharp. So your ear can hear it as a dominant 7th chord without the 5th, right? So if you were part writing anyway, and you wanted to double notes in a dominant seventh chord to avoid part writing errors, you would omit the fifth, because that's not a tendency tone, right? Your thirds and sevenths are going to be your tendency tones, and then your root is kind of, I think of it as the identity of your chord. So if you take out that fifth, that D flat or C sharp, you're left with 1, 3, and 7, and you just happen to be doubling 3 again. So your ear can sometimes register it as a dominant seventh without the fifth. For me personally, when I'm practicing and like trying to hear these things, and just, you know, if I've got a piece of music in front of me or if I'm playing it at the piano, I don't hear it as a dominant seventh chord in context. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but don't worry if it doesn't just scream dominant seventh to you when you're trying to learn how to listen for these things. So the next one is the French chord. So that's going to be G flat, B flat, E natural, and C natural. Okay, so it is one pitch, a half step different from your German augmented sixth chord. So we've got scale degree 2, C natural, which is a half step away from D flat. So, as a consequence of, hold on, the dog needs to go out. Hey, go, buddy. So, okay, French augmented sixth chord. So, G flat, B flat, C, E natural. So your ear can sometimes hear this as a dominant seventh with a flat 5. That's C natural, rather than C sharp in the context of the F sharp 7. That's the German. That's the French. Okay? And then as I mentioned earlier, your German, you can hear as a dominant seventh chord. And I often do when listening to this stuff. So how do they resolve? So we know what they are. They're predominant chords. They draw your ear to 5. We know what they consist of. We know that they're not really chords. So let's talk about how to resolve them if you are asked to do a part writing assignment. So let's start with the Italian plus 6 chord. So you've got flat 6 in the bass, tonic, sharp 4, another tonic. So how this is going to resolve, that flat 6 and that sharp 4 are going to expand out to 5. Then of the 2 tonic pitches that you've doubled, one of them is going to go down to your leading tone, and the other is going to go up to scale degree 2. Right, so both tonic pitches could go down, and you would have basically root and third of your 5 chord, which is enough to register in your ear that, hey, this is a 5 chord. But obviously that would be parallel octaves. So where it makes sense, depending on if you're using open or closed voicing, one of those tonic notes goes down to leading tone, one of them goes up to scale degree 2, and you've got a major triad for your 5 chord. So and it should be noted that the Italian resolves to 5. So the French augmented 6 chord can resolve to 5 or cadential 6/4 or 1/6/4. And the reason that is just for voice leading purposes. Of course, anything's possible when you get out there and start composing and analyzing music. You know, nobody came and slapped a composer's wrist for writing a French chord with a different voicing or resolving an Italian chord to 1/6/4. There might actually be an example in the book. I just don't remember off the top of my head. So anyway, the French chord can resolve to 1, 6, 4, or 5. So again, you're going to have that augmented 6 expand out. That's going to be common for all the augmented 6 chords, which is their function. And you're going to keep scale degree 2 as a common tone. So if we voice this out, be flat 6, 1, 2, sharp 4. So flat 6 and sharp 4 go out to 5. We keep scale degree 2 right where it is. And then tonic goes down to leading tone. And then you're left with a root position 5 chord. Easy enough. If you want to go to 1, 6, 4, then instead of scale degree 2, you keep the tonic as the leading tone. So augmented 6 resolves out, keeping tonic as common tone, and then taking that scale degree 2 up to scale degree 3. So then you go 1, 6, 4, 5, 1. Okay? And so the last one is your German augmented 6. That resolves to 1, 6, 4 primarily to avoid parallel fifths if resolved to the 5 chord. You can get around it, but generally you're going to have to leap a third or more in one of your voices to achieve that avoidance of parallel fifths and octaves. So generally speaking, German augmented 6 chords resolve to 1, 6, 4. So spell it out: G flat, B flat, D flat, E natural. So your augmented 6 are going to expand out. You're going to keep tonic, and then that flat 3 is going to go to diatonic or major 3. Okay. I was reading in a couple different textbooks in regards to that flat 3 going back up to regular 3. Remember I said when you write chromatic pitches, you always have a choice. And in general, the alteration that you use, whether to use a flat or a sharp, will determine how that pitch resolves. So if I write G flat, B flat, D flat, E, G flat and E natural want to go down and up to F. Your B flat wants to sit there, but if I've got a D flat, that would lead you to think it would want to go down to C. So I guess there are a couple different schools of thought. Like I said, in one textbook I saw that in a German augmented 6 chord, you wanted to write your flat 3 as sharp 2 because in general, lowered notes resolve down, raised notes resolve up. So it really depends on who your theory teacher is and how nitpicky they are. Which is interesting to me because when you are first introduced to the German augmented 6 chords, and it says in the context of a major scale, how it's spelled, it's scale degree flat 6, sharp 4, 1, and flat 3. They almost always say flat 3 right off the bat, but that's just kind of something worth noting, fun fact, if you will. So you can also resolve to 5, 7, but in this case, rather than, we'll just stick with the German. Rather than your augmented 6 expanding out, your flat 6 is going to go down to 5, but your sharp 4 is going to go a half step down to scale degree 4 and become the 7th of your 5, 7. So it's in resolving a German chord to 5/7, it's going to sound something like, well, I would need to voice that a different way, but flat 6 goes down, sharp 4 goes down, and then this is totally parallel in the way that I have it voiced right now, but we'll roll with it anyway for just a second. Everything goes a half step down, right? Because enharmonically, we're at a G flat 7 or F sharp 7, and your 5 in B flat is F7. So it takes a lot of careful planning and composing to resolve that, just because everything wants to move down a half step. So you kind of have to voice it so that you don't have anything a fifth or an octave apart. Okay, and like I said, these are fabulous chords to use as pivot chords in progressions. That's something later on that we can talk about. Another interesting thing that I love, because I'm a giant nerd, is that your German augmented 6th chord, which, as I said, is enharmonically dominant 7th chord. But if you sit there and ask yourself what would the secondary dominant be, where would F sharp 7 want to go? It would be the 5 of B7, or if you're sticking to B flat, it would be C flat 7, or it doesn't have to be a 7th chord, sorry, C flat or B major, which is also the Neapolitan 6th chord. So in some weird universe, I'm sure that you could use your German augmented 6th chord to tonicize your Neapolitan 6th chord, and if I get bored enough, I just might do it. But like I said, that's just me being nerdy and something to note. So I mentioned that you will almost always have flat 6 in the bass and sharp 4 in one of the outer voices. Of course, when you get into the wild and start analyzing pieces, this isn't always the case. You tend to have to look for the characteristic pitches rather than, scanning a bass line for flat 6, because it's not always going to be there. But in the context of your theory courses, you would almost always want to have that flat 6 in the bass, unless there was some extenuating circumstance in the chord progression that led you to not. So, predominant chords, augmented 6 gives them their sound, their functionality, and their means to resolution. How do you approach them? You can approach them like any other predominant chord. In this case, since you've got flat 6 in the bass, it is very common to approach with a 4 chord in first inversion, since all you have to do is lower the bass note by a half. You could also approach it with a 6 chord in reposition and do the exact same thing. But in general, let's see, you can also approach them from tonic. And as I said, since these are predominant chords, just like the Neapolitan 6, you're not going to have a dominant right before it. So you're not going to have 5 augmented 6 chord 5, right? So if you're taking a listening exam, if you are listening for a piece of music and you are sure that you hear a 5 chord, you will not have an augmented 6 chord right after it. It's very possible that the one right before it was, but that's for your ear to decide. So let us play through some of these. So let's start with, and you'll have to forgive me, my piano skills are not at symphonic levels, but we'll stay in, let's just stick with our good friend B flat. So here's the major scale again to get you oriented. All right, so let's listen to an example of the Italian +6 chord. Oh, I forgot to mention, if you are notating these in a harmonic analysis, there's a couple ways you can do it. So some people are cool with just a +6, as in, hey, I heard an augmented 6 chord. I'm not specifying which one it is. Some professors are cool with that. Some professors require you to actually go through and identify them. So just be aware of that. But in general, at least at USM, +6 is pretty acceptable. You can also notate it as each of the three. So you can write capital IT +6 for Italian +6, capital F lowercase r +6 for French, and then capital G lowercase er +6 for German augmented 6 chords. So that's worth noting, I think. Yeah. So, and I say that because I'm playing a couple different examples, and it helps me think about, okay, it's this particular +6 chord that I'm trying to show you or hear in my head. So back to B flat. I might need to take that down an octave. No, we'll be fine. So this progression that I wrote out is 6 chords. I'll play it for you, and then we'll talk through it a little bit, and then I'll play through it again for you. So here it is. I literally wrote these out like 30 seconds before I started the video. Okay, got it. So what I played was, starting on tonic, I went down to the minor 6 chord, no surprises. Then I kept that G in the bass, because remember we're in B flat, G is the 6th scale degree. So I kept the G in the bass, went to 4/6 chord, so E flat major over G, and then I hit my Italian +6 chord. So then I took that G, lowered it a half step, took that E flat in the soprano, raised it a half step, and kept the tonic. So that G that was in the tenor leapt up a minor third to that B flat, so both the tenor and the alto are on the same B flat. And then resolving it, just like I said, one tonic goes down to leading tone, one tonic goes up to scale degree 2, and then G flat and E natural go out to F. And then I just played back to tonic for context. So let's listen to that again. So B flat, G minor, E flat over G, Italian, F major, B flat major. Okay? Let us try one in a minor key. Like I said, the augmented 6 chords almost sound a little less surprising in the minor keys, also because that flat 6 is diatonic. So let's switch to C minor just for some variety. So that's going to be So this chord progression that I wrote out is also 6 chords if I resolve the 5 to 1, which I probably will do. So let me play it for you. And again, we're listening for the Italian augmented 6 chord. And we'll see, I might take this down an octave. Yeah, I'll do that. So here we go. Starting on tonic, 6 chords. Oh, sorry. Okay, so here's what I did. We started on tonic, kept that C in the bass, went to a 4-6-4, so we're using a passing 6-4 here since we returned to tonic. So we go tonic, passing 6-4. So remember, 4 is minor in a minor key with that flat 6, back to tonic. Then the bass goes from C to A flat. Again, there's no accidental there since in C minor, A flat is diatonic. So the bass goes down a third. In the tenor, my E flat goes down to C. G goes to F sharp, so there's my sharp 4. And then in the soprano, I stay on C because remember, for the Italian +6 chords, you double the tonic pitch. Okay, and so we're at the +6 chord. It resolves F sharp and A flat to G. One tonic goes up to scale degree 2. So in the tenor, I chose to go from C to D. And then in my soprano, C to B natural. Remember, when you're writing these or analyzing them, if you're in a minor key, raise your leading tone. Oh, sorry. And then I resolved it back to 1. Okay, let's listen to an example of the French augmented 6 chord. So I'm reading out of Dr. Beard's book. If you are following along in your oral athletics book, we're on page 37. I'm doing the 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5 chord progression starting in measure 266. So 266. Now, this is going to be in G minor. This one is tricky because you have a secondary dominant in there and an augmented 6 chord. So I'll play it for you and then we'll discuss that. So 5 chords starting on tonic. To resolve back to 1. Okay, so what happened there, we started on tonic and then immediately to a secondary dominant. So in this case, we went to 5 of 4. So we want to approach the augmented 6 chord with 4, as I mentioned earlier. So we went from tonic. The bass goes down a whole step. So I've got F natural in the bass. I keep D in the tenor, G up top, and my B flat goes to B. Sorry. So we go from G minor to G7. So G7 is the 5th of C, major or minor in this case. The bass goes down another whole step. Tenor goes down a whole step. So we've got E flat in the bass, C in the tenor. We keep that G in the alto, and then that B natural moves up a half step to C. So now we're at C minor over E flat. So in the key of G minor, that's our 4-6 chord. Okay, and then we keep that E flat in the bass, because remember in G flat minor, E flat is our flat 6. That scale degree 4, that C in the tenor, goes up to C sharp. So an example of where your augmented 6 is not in your outer voices, but it still works. So then we keep that G in the alto, and in the soprano, that C leaps down to A natural. So that's scale degree 2. So if we've got E flat, flat 6 in the bass, C sharp, sharp 4 in the tenor, G, or tonic, in the alto, and scale degree 2, A, in the soprano. So then we resolve that. The augmented 6 expand out, E flat to D, C sharp to D. That tonic goes a half step down to leading tone, and that scale degree 2 stays right where it is in the soprano. And that gets us to our D major chord, which is our 5 in G minor. Now remember to raise your leading tone. And then I just resolved it back up to 1. So here's another listen of it. 5 chords. I'll add probably back to tonic, so 6 possibly. So here we go. Oh, sorry. Sitting in an awkward angle with the range. So that's the French. And then let's listen to an example of the German augmented 6 chords. So I wrote out this chord progression in B flat major, my old friend. Which I didn't realize before has the same key signature as G minor. 7 chords. Okay, so I'll scooch down and take this down an octave. Okay, so here we go. 7 chords starting on tonic. Sorry, that was a little slow to begin with, but what happened was started in root position, B flat major, so 1. Bass goes down a half step. Tenor goes up a half step. Alto stays the same. Soprano goes up a step. So we've got a 5-4-2 because we've got that A natural in the bass. And then in the other voices, it's E flat, F, C. So then we return to tonic. So that can be thought of as an embellishing dominant sevenths. So then we go back to tonic. And then we go to flat 6 in the bass. So we go from B flat to G flat. In the tenor, we go from D to D flat. In the alto, we go from F to E natural. And then we keep tonic in the soprano. Okay, and then we resolve it out. So a couple of things here. I resolved to 5 in this case. You can also resolve to 1-6-4. So back to, so if I wanted to resolve to 5-6-4, or excuse me, 1-6-4, would still resolve out those augmented 6, but instead of taking the tonic to leading tone, I'd leave the tonic there in the soprano. And in the tenor, that D flat, just move it up a half step to D. So, oh, excuse me. German, 1-6-4, 5, 1. All right, y'all. Thank you for being patient with my piano skills. like I said, just composed these shorthand before sitting down to do this, but I still hope that this has helped you. So if you want to leave any feedback, please feel free to drop a like, comment, subscribe to the page if you want. But otherwise, I hope you all have a good rest of your evenings, and I hope that everybody continues to stay safe and well. So until next time.